just introducing myself. I'm the technical manager of the company Kelp Products International, and we have only one product, and that's Kelpak. It's a seaweed-based product. So I guess today is just about what is in Kelpak that makes it work, and then just looking at some information that we have from trials.
So in this group, Eric, you've used Kelpak on your farm, and then I don't think Luke, you have, right, too? So there's just two people that have a little bit of experience with Kelpak in this room. So we'll kind of cross over that way. But if you want to kind of talk about the history of kelp and what species you guys work with.
Well, our company was started 40 years ago. I've been with the company for 20 years now. And as I've mentioned, we do only the one product. So we try and get as much information as possible, not only field trials where we show the results, but also to find out what actually makes the product work. And with your new analytical methods that's come available over the last 5 years, as far as I'm concerned, over the last 5 years, I've learned more about the product than the past 15 years. So yeah, there is some interesting new information. Should I
just kind of keep going through it. I guess you can kind of both go, but
nothing's happening.
Nothing's happening.
Right.
There you go.
That's something not so relevant at this point. In the United States, it's a definition of a biostimulant. Officially, in the United States, the word biostimulant does not exist yet. They worked on a definition here as well, which is very similar to that. That has been passed, and I don't really understand the government setup here. It's been passed by one house, but now it's got to be still passed by the Senate or something. And then officially there will be an official word with a meaning biostimulant. And not having that at this point, seaweed products would be registered either as a fertilizer by state or as a growth regulator by EPA.
So believe it or not, it's pretty hard to get products like this registered, because if it's a fertilizer, it's got to have enough concentration of something to claim it.
Yeah, and there's another issue in that EPA doesn't want to handle biostimulants, and Department of Agriculture doesn't really want to handle it because it's additional work.
So where do you fall under then?
At this point we are a fertilizer. If you look at this, is the EU definition of a biostimulant, that very definitely under federal EU government it falls under fertilizer. But yeah, as I say here, you've got two groups here. The ones say, well, it's got to be EPA, which will be under pesticide growth regulator, and others say no, it really is a fertilizer. This Professor Dujardin, he is one of the big heads in the working group on biostimulants in the EU, and he said that as a biostimulant, you rather should look at what they do but what they are.
So what he's saying is that if you look at the ingredient, kind of like the not raw ingredients, but what makes up like Kelpak, it's going to be words you've never seen before, and that's what gets kind of tough here. Is we're used to NPK, micro, secondaries, a little bit of hormones, and so it's going to be kind of something different. That's why these guys that's why they say is if biostimulant as a whole does something, but when you start talking about steroids and polyamines, it's kind of gets a little bit in depth.
And I think it relates to seaweed products in that we talk about products that tend to give you foliar growth. We say this is cytokinin-like, and products that give you strong root growth, we say it's auxin-like.
Does anyone have any experience with like a PGR, plant growth regulator type of product? Ascend, Radiate, any of those? Ascend, so a synthetic auxin cytokinin. I know Loveland's got a Radiate. There's a few others out there, but so those are synthetic plant growth regulator products, and so this is kind of going to be in the same sphere as we're talking. Kelpak is an all-natural recipe of different biostimulant.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that the people that want it registered as a pesticide, your seaweed is actually edible. People serve it in restaurants, and all we do is we extract the cell sap. So there's nothing PGR about it. It's a natural product. This is just to show some different seaweed species. Quite often I'm told, well, you've got a seaweed product, some other companies have got a seaweed product, it all comes from the sea, so it must be the same. So it doesn't matter what product I use as long as it's a seaweed product, and that's not true. What I'm showing here is that there's very definite differences in your morphology. It's like comparing a lettuce to a cauliflower almost. Is if you're going to do an analysis on cabbage versus cauliflower, certainly you're going to have differences, and that's what I'm trying to show here, is very definitely morphological differences.
Why don't you give them a quick...
I had a slide where I show an orange and a grape. I mean, it's from grapes you can get wine, and from an orange you get oranges. Two different products, and it's exactly the same. If you use different seaweed species, you're going to very definitely have different products in the end.
Why don't you tell them how you actually harvest and produce the product? Because the middle one there, I don't know if it's
point. The middle photograph, that is our seaweed that we're using, Eclonia maxima. You can see stem-like structures and then leaf-like structures on top. Now that stem can grow up to 30 feet in 1 year, so it's got a prolific growth rate, and an adult plant can weigh up to 60 pounds. What we do is, as you see there, we send divers in, they cut it at the bottom of the ocean floor, and because that stem is hollow, it'll float to the surface where it's being gathered into boats. People often ask us, why don't we do mechanical harvesting? It's the rock bottom is very rugged, so it'll be real tough to get a mechanical harvesting operation in there. And then it's within your wave action, so you have continuous waves where the seaweed grows. Why not deeper is if that leaf-like structure doesn't reach the surface of the ocean within a certain amount of time, a few months, the plant will die back. So you only the deepest you'll get it probably 30 feet max. If you go deeper than that, you won't find. So
where do you harvest it?
It's in the southern tip of Africa. That's the only area in the world that you really find the seaweed species. If you look at the top, Ascophyllum nodosum, that's used most commonly worldwide for seaweed products. But why? It's found on the Canadian coast, it's found on the east coast of the US, it's found on the UK coast, it's found on the European coast, and it's found on the Scandinavian countries' coast. So there's a huge amount of seaweed available worldwide.
Are you at all familiar with Agzyme, with that product? Agzyme.
What is Agzyme? Is the name of the product itself?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to
There's
look it up.
supposed to be some kind of seaweed in there.
Sure.
Look, I mean,
Wondering if I find a label, if it'll say what type.
there are not many seaweed product producers that have the pure seaweed. We are one of those. A lot of companies are producing a seaweed product where they add the seaweed component that they buy in from suppliers like us to a nutrient component. So you also need to look at the analysis of the seaweed. If you look at nutrient analysis and there's significant levels of nutrients in it, then you know it's not a pure seaweed product. It's a nutrient solution with a seaweed component in it.
Exam is this one too.
Is which one?
The top one, the most prolific one around. So when I was talking to Riann this morning, they have a team of divers that harvest this 5 days out of every week for most of the year. I mean, it's kind of an interesting deal. They're cutting and.
Is there regulation on how much you can harvest?
Oh yeah, we have a coastline concession, and we are only allowed to, by area, a certain amount of tonnage per year. Excuse me. We also have to maintain the ecology, so we harvest strips. If you imagine a checkerboard, as in the first part of the year you will harvest the dark blocks, and then you come back and you harvest the light blocks. In the meantime, the dark blocks that's been harvested, there's been growth again, so you continuously have a supply of your source. Your smaller sea life uses the forests as protection against especially the great white shark, and also your abalone feeds on the seaweed itself, so it's a source of food for the abalone. We reharvest when you're opening. I always thought there was regrowth, same than you. When you cut it at the bottom, there's regrowth from that piece that's left over. It's not. Your seaweed is actually algae, and the algae germinates, is spores that germinating. So what happens if you open up an area by harvesting? There's sunlight penetrating, and that sunlight causes the spores to germinate. And then 6 months after you've harvested, you've got millions of plants growing. But then the stronger plant starts to outperforming the younger plants, the smaller plants die back. And by 18 months you're about back where you were before you harvested. The good thing about this with GPS plotting and everything is we can now manipulate the age of the seaweed. And that is one of the reasons why we have a very consistent product, even though the source is natural. We can manipulate the age of the seaweed. We harvest anywhere from 2 years to 2.5 years from where we have harvested before. And you can think for yourself, if you have a little plant like this and a really big plant, that you will have differences in the composition of the cell set. So as far as we know, we're the only company that really manipulates the age of our source that we're using. But it's certainly it's a contributing to having a very consistent product. If you look at extraction, the most common extraction used for seaweed product production would be alkaline hydrolysis, is where you submit your seaweed material to a very strong alkaline solution, normally potassium hydroxide. Now that dissolves the cell walls. Very easy to identify those kind of products. It will have an almost black color to a very dark brown color. And the reason for that is the alginates that's synonym with seaweed. That's if you touch seaweed, there's always a slimy feeling. That's the alginates in the seaweed. That alginates will turn black when it's exposed to a very high pH. So your alkaline hydrolysis will always give you that really dark brown or black color. And when you smell it, it'll smell like almost like a fermented product. It has a foul smell. Now we don't use that extraction. We have a very simple physical analysis. We mince up the fresh seaweed, and that fresh seaweed is being submitted to a very high pressure. Now under that high pressure, your cell walls are being compacted. Then you have a sudden release of that pressure, and that
I didn't find any matching electricity consultants.
It picked up my voice. Sorry, let me turn this off. Switch it off. Okay, so when you release that pressure, that compacted cell will expand so rapidly that it actually bursts. If you think, the analogy that I like to use is you blow up a balloon and you put it in a vacuum. That's going to happen. It's going to pop, right? Because there's no resistance keeping that outer part of the balloon together. So, but now, whether you take one balloon or 1 million balloons, you put that in a vacuum, what's going to happen? All the million balloons are going to burst. And that is also good about a Kelpak. It's you don't only burst some cell walls, you burst all the cell walls. So all the actives are being released. And then within the cell itself, you have different organelles. Each of these organelles are surrounded by a membrane. Now all these membranes react exactly the same in the balloon when you submit it to that pressure differential. So all of these membranes that encapsulate the different organelles are burst. So whatever is in each different organelle is also being released. So you actually you get access to all the actives present in that cell. Now this is just a simple trial to show that there are differences among seaweed products. We used an Ascophyllum nodosum extract. Remember I told you that Ascophyllum nodosum is most used in the world because there's a lot of sources of it. And then we compare that to the Eclonia maxima product, which is our product, Kelpak. You treat the plants with intervals, and then at some point you stop treating. You harvest the top growth and you measure the weight, and you wash out the roots and you measure the weight. If you look at the right hand side, the green and brown bars, as compared to the blue, that's control, there's very little difference between the two products. But if you look at, on the left, if you look at the above soil parts, your Ascophyllum nodosum was very prominent in promoting that top growth. And then if you look at the middle, your Eclonia maxima was very prominent in producing roots. So two different seaweed species, the two products have very different effect on plant growth. This is just to show that we have some growth regulators, auxin, cytokinins, traces of gibberellic acid, brasinosteroids, and then polyamines and fluorotannins, not really considered plant growth regulators, but we know that these compounds can give you strong effects when plants are treated. Now, for years we talked about auxin dominant product, and the reason for that really is if you compare the 64 micrograms to 0.3, there's a huge difference. So in reference to cytokinins, we are strongly auxin dominant. But if you look at the 64 micrograms per liter, that's parts per billion. It's still minute. It is still minute. And what we have found since is that we do a bioassay where we measure the rooting activity, the number of roots that's being formed, which is a typical auxin response. But there is the equivalent that we get in the bioassay is that of 11,000 micrograms. But why would it be if there's only 64 micrograms of auxins in the product? It is because brasinosteroids and polyamines are also strong rooting mediums. So your plant doesn't only respond to the auxins, it also responds to the brasinosteroids and the polyamines. And as you can see, the polyamines are present in much higher concentrations. So that is why your seaweed's response is much higher when you compare it to your natural, your synthetic auxins that's normally used in rooting. But that's also, basically, we now talk about an auxin, not an auxin dominant product, but an auxin-like product. Okay?
So so the way the plant works is as it's growing, auxin is produced in new shoots, and it has to go down and hit the roots to produce more root mass, and then the cytokinin is produced in the roots and moves up, and that's just kind of how plant hormones work. So we have a product that has a lot of auxin-like compounds in it that you can add to a seed or an area, a furrow, and create more root growth.
So this is just.
Sorry, I'll go back.
Yeah, that is just of the Kelpak itself then?
Correct.
That
This is an analysis of the
Oh,
Kelpak.
Yep.
just the Kelpak?
Just the Kelpak.
Not, you're not comparing it to on another plant then, after you've used it, right?
No,
This is just the Kelpak.
just what's in the Kelpak for it.
Can I take a photo of that?
Yeah, I can send you the PowerPoint too if you'd like, Eric. I can send it to all you guys. But go ahead. What's that?
Kind of what I hear you saying is that the effect is not the sum of its parts, that when they work together.
It's much more a soup that gives you the reaction than to try and look at individual components of the soup.
Yeah.
And that's what most of the products on the market do today is try to focus on a synthetic part and use that, and that's why.
I can give you a call.
Now, last year, someone asked us now your nutritional value in the product. Does that contribute to rooting at all? So we had a look at it. We have potassium. We've got a little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of phosphorus, and then a reasonable amount of calcium, magnesium, and then also some boron in the product, which we've done over many years when we've done our mineral analysis. So we took the typical concentration of each component on its own in water. We got no rooting response except for boron that gave it just a slight bump. Then we added it in that recipe that's in Kelpak. Is we added that components at that ratios into water. There's no now just using different nutritional products to get to that. That combination actually gave a nice rooting response. Not as good as Kelpak. I mean, it's probably about half of it. But that also told us that it's not only these compounds that contribute to the rooting, it's also that specific ratio of minerals that you find in Kelpak that also contributes to the rooting of it. So what do auxins do? I think auxins are best known for lateral rooting. As a matter of fact, you have synthetic auxins that's used commercially, especially in nurseries where you want to produce roots. And the other most prominent effect on plants is pollen tube elongation. There's lots of information available about auxins promoting pollen tube. Then brasinosteroids, what it's probably best known for, seed germination and pollen tube elongation. That's what it's best known for, but we also know that it improves rooting. And then polyamines, probably best known for reduction in stress. If you treat stressed plants with polyamines, the plant will grow better. With other words, the symptoms of the stress will be masked. And then it's especially known for pollen germination, and then also for pollen tube elongation. It doesn't promote roots on its own, but we already know when you use auxins on plants, you get a rooting response. Then if you add the polyamines to that, you get synergism. There's all of a sudden your auxins work better. Okay.
You can probably skip past. That's just the.
I'll skip that. Just to shade, when we talk about auxin-like products and cytokinin-like products, if we have a strong auxin dominance, we get a rooting response. If we have a strong cytokinin dominance, we get a shooting response. And that's why we talk about auxin-like and cytokinin-like products.
So Riann, so we did a bioassay between Kelpak and a pretty common product around the Midwest called Ascend. And can you touch on that bioassay, what you guys found out?
Yeah, is if you look at on the label of Ascend, then you see that it's got auxins, cytokinins, and gibberellic acid in it. And so we put it in this bioassay and we got no rooting response whatsoever. Then we did a mineral analysis on Ascend and we were very surprised about the high levels of nutrients in it. So the question is, if you use Ascend as a starter, is it a fertilizer effect or is it a PGR effect? But what was interesting is that we got no rooting response from it at all. This is just to show the polyamines. We grow plants in phosphorus deficient conditions. We apply polyamines to that plant and then you get a better growth. Of course, if we apply it with Kelpak, you also get the better growth. But we need to remember that polyamines contains no phosphorus. That molecule contains no phosphorus whatsoever. It just shows, we've done it with nitrogen deficiency, we've done it with potassium deficiency, we've done it with plants grown under cold conditions. And I mean, all the when you treat it with polyamines, you get the same kind of response, is that the plants actually grow better that's treated with the polyamines. The fluorotannins, not a lot was known about these compounds until about 5 years ago. What we certainly have seen is your ecol, which is one of the fluorotannins, the ecol actually referring to Eclonia, our seaweed. It was isolated out of our seaweed. Now here they showed that the ecol was as good a rooting hormone as your indole acid. Now K-5 molar, you're talking about parts per million, very low concentrations.
An IBA in that picture would be a synthetic auxin.
Synthetic
correct?
auxin, yeah. That's the most commonly used product for rooting. Yeah. Okay, this is just the bioassay. What I'm showing here is we germinate mung beans. At some point we cut off the roots and we dip the stems into various solutions. This would be water, this would be Kelpak. So when I talk about a rooting response, increasing the number of root tips, it's not even doubling, is we can literally up to 10-fold increase the number of root tips. Now where do plants naturally take up their nutrients? Root tips. So you actually increase that capacity of taking up nutrients naturally by 10-fold. And what is also interesting is cytokinins are being produced in the root tips of plants. So you and I have 10-fold more root tips to produce cytokinins. So the plant naturally produces more cytokinins, and what does cytokinins give you? Top growth.
So this
but now you already have the root system to support that top growth. That's the important part.
And that's the beauty of it. And that's when you start to look at other products on the market that produce top growth, which is what, as a farmer, we probably see, yeah, I can see that it's working or I see a response. But if you don't have the root system to supply that top growth, it can be misleading. So it's kind of interesting.
Okay, and that is just, I already talked about it. When you do the bioassay, you also put indole acid in the bioassay. You get the same response from our seaweed than what you would have gotten with 11,000 milligrams of IBA. And the reason for, well, there's only 64. The maximum we've ever measured was 138 micrograms. The average 64, but why this difference? It really is that polyamines, fluorotannins, and racinosteroids also contribute. They give similar responses than the auxins. So the plant responds to all of them, not just the auxins. And that is also the reason why we now talk about auxin-like product. Now, I talked about several of these compounds also playing a role in pollen germination and growth. You have poor levels of these, poor germination, slow pollen tube development, the chances of reaching the ovule to set seed is not very high. So under these conditions, I've showed that Kelpak have auxins, Brassinosteres, and polyamines, so you would expect more pollen to germinate, better pollen tube growth, more ovules being fertilized, more seed set. And what more seed set obviously means better yields. Oh.
You want to go back one? I'll push the play button there.
Now, what we've done here is one of my colleagues, when he was still busy with his PhD, he developed a medium in which you could artificially germinate pollen. This is the medium plus Kelpak. Time-lapse photography, starting 20 minutes after the pollen's been introduced, running for about 40 minutes. You can see a lot more pollen that germinated. As a matter of fact, some of the pollen grew 2 tubes, like that one there and that one there. And if you look at the length, there was much better pollen tube elongation. So what we talked about in theory, we can actually prove happens in practice. Very important for stone fruits, because if you don't seed a set, you don't get fruit. Also for nut crops. If you don't set the seed, you don't have a crop. This is just the same kind of study that we've done, and we used Kelpak and Goimar and Ascophyllum nodosum seaweed product from France, and Stimplex and Ascophyllum nodosum product excuse me, from Canada. The interesting part is at no concentration tested, we could get Goimar or Stimplex to germinate in that medium. And then here you have your Kelpak. What is the benefit of that kind of thing is certainly with corn, you can increase the set and you get less of this kind of effect. And I've already mentioned that for stone fruit, if you don't set your seed, you don't get fruit. Shall we skip?
So actually this crowd would be more corn, soybeans, and edibles, and a little bit of wheat.
Okay.
Our sugar beet guy wasn't able to show up, but
All right.
so yeah, stick with the typical row crops and
Okay.
broad acre.
For many years we focused only on a foliar application on corn, and that was normally between your 4 and 5 leaf stage, normally applied with a herbicide. So we've got lots of results on that. This is a typical trial that was done, this one in Bulgaria. Here's your control, here is your Ascophyllum nodosum product available in Bulgaria. Certainly each time that seaweed product gave you a result, but then you compare it to Kelpak. Kelpak was always better. This was a trial that was done, I think it was in Washington State, where they applied Kelpak at tillering stage, and then some point later they dig up the plants. You can see the effect on roots, and you've got several of these from trials that you've done.
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm showing here, trials that was done worldwide, different countries, different climatological conditions, different farming practices. The number of trials that was done, barley, wheat, maize, silage maize, and then your yield increases that you get in these trials. So the focus was always there, but then we learned about brassinosteroids that plays a role in germination, and we also realized that ECOL plays a role in germination. ECOL stimulates the enzyme alpha amylase. It breaks down the starch in the seed, and it produces ATP, and ATP is the molecule that gives you the energy source for all your biochemical cycles in the plant. So we started focusing at seed treatment and then also in furrow application. Some of the first trials that was done by South African Agricultural Research Council. They did a half a pint and 1 pint application in furrow. And if you look at the measurements of roots at this stage after germination, you saw a very definite improvement of roots, while if you look at the foliar growth, there was not much difference. But the important part is that very early on, you had a very significant development of roots. And again, that you can confirm that with your trial in beans.
Yep. We've had a lot of this stuff. Kelpak's been around for a long time, so they got a lot of global data. And QLF started working with Kelpak in the last few years, and so we're trying to build our own database of more U.S.-based stuff. So we have a good mixture of global and then regional stuff on this presentation.
Okay, well.
So this is actually from this area.
This gives me time to give a bite.
So this is actually a wheat crop. Luke, I think this was yours early on when we looked at it. We just took some samples early on and just looked at rooting, and there was a definite difference in overall root mass at this time frame.
Was this in furrow application?
This was seed application. Seed application, yeah.
And a very coarse.
Yeah. So did you see it throughout the whole plant life then?
You really couldn't necessarily see a lot up top. But when you dug it out, you could see the root growth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you couldn't see the wheat was this much higher on that side of the
Right.
split.
Well,
The yield monitor showed it on the combine.
you don't really want taller wheat.
No.
No.
You're
And I don't know if it,
What was interesting?
and I don't necessarily know if it stood any better or not, but
Did you notice anything at flowering time? Was there any difference there? When the wheat flowered?
that's a good question. I don't know. It was my
Yes,
first
yeah.
time growing wheat. So
Yeah.
Well, in
I
all
learned
the
the flowers
trials
was
we've
right
done,
before it
it's
flowered.
very tough to see a difference.
Yep.
So in the end, you go to yield, and you talk about a 10% yield increase to visually see that with the eye.
And you're talking 8 to 10 bushels is what
Yeah.
the difference was.
So what was the difference?
8 to 10 bushel.
8 to 10?
Yep. And really not the best seed treatment application. We just sprayed it on when it was coming out the seed tender with a pumper, and
Yep.
made sure the seeds were wet.
It was
4-man seed treatment.
Right.
it was one of those deals where I had some left and it was
Let's try it.
Let's
yeah.
try
Try it.
Yeah. This information here, what was interesting is the question was, what if people only use granular starter fertilizer? How would they go about applying Kelpak? So you've got some growers that use granular MAP, that's applied with the planter at plant. So what they did here is they sprayed Kelpak onto the MAP granules. And we were really surprised to see that that actually also has an effect.
Well, you guys are just going all seed treatment though?
That was, that's the goal. The closer you can get the Kelpak to the seed, you're going to have the best concentration. We work with any idea though, like if guys don't have the ability to put it in furrow or have somebody to treat it, there's different ways guys are trying. But yes, if the closer you can get it to the seed, the more economical it's going to be,
Right.
and the lower concentration you actually have to apply.
There are some issues with some of your seed suppliers that if they sell you already treated seed, they will not warrant, you will lose your warranty on the seed if you go and apply more seed treatment.
We found that in edible beans last year.
And in this case, you would want to go to an in-furrow application if you have
The ability.
yeah, if you have the ability.
the other part with like seed treatments. When I've done it, we'll use Roberts for an example. When they're doing a full treatment on it, then you go add another 6. If you're going to try add another 6 ounces of Kelpak to the mix, I'm running it twice because you need to let it dry down to put that extra, otherwise it becomes a brick in the box, but. So you're right, a lot of guys aren't gonna wanna use it as seed treatment, or a lot of dealers aren't, cause you're doing twice the work to do it.
Because yeah.
But for the benefit that you're getting out of it, I don't mind doing it.
Riann, talk about the shelf life of it. How much early can you treat something?
I'm not sure.
It might be in here.
Have the slide here.
So you treat it at about the same time, but there is a good amount of time where you could treat a seed before. It's not a living, breathing thing like an inoculant would be, where you want to get it on as close to planting as possible.
But it's a seed treatment, you're doing 6 ounces on the seed compared to 16 ounces in furrow.
Yeah.
So economically, it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Here, this is a trial in a greenhouse. Why in a greenhouse? Everything is the same. The soil medium that we use is pre-mixed. The amount of water that the plants are getting is exactly the same. The temperature is exactly the same. So under those conditions, you will best be able to say what a treatment effect is. And the message here was just that this was seed treatment, and this was in furrow application. If you look at the number of tillers, stem thickness, shoot weight, number of ears, total ear mass, just about whatever you used, it gave a positive response. Summary of seed treatment and in furrow applications worldwide: Midwest, wheat, corn; South Africa, wheat, corn; Brazil, corn; and then in furrow applications, South Africa and Midwest. This is the number of trials that was done. I did not include last year's trials. I'm too lazy. As a matter of fact, I only received that information a couple of days ago.
Sure.
But yeah, what it shows you is that all the treatments worked. This is the average yield increase of all the trials. And then some people say that 4% and 5% yield increase is not much. All of these trials, the average of these trials, the yields was above 180 bushels. Now what was very interesting is 5 years ago 180 bushels seemed to be a good yield. Nowadays people talk about 250 bushels per acre. So some of the new trial results, we saw an increase in yield of 250 bushel yields with Kelpak. But this is not only Kelpak, this is the Kelpak plus the QLF range, the whole program. Okay, here we come to, if you've treated the seed, do you have a shelf life of that seed? A trial done with winter wheat in the Ukraine, where they looked at treating the seed and planting, treating the seed, and the control here we will treat with the same amount of water that they put the product on, just to make sure that it's not a water effect. So each of these will have its own control. So don't try and compare the percentage increases here. 13 days after treatment, 33 days after treatment, you can see with all of them you had a positive effect on yield. In Brazil with corn, they've gone as far as 3 months from treatment to actual planting, and they still see a response. So there was a question, what is the best timing to apply? Here they looked at the seed treatment. Look at here, this is about half the rate that what we recommend in the US. And a foliar at 2 pints per acre, 4 leaf, tillering, and then boot swell. And I think the message here was that all of them actually gave you a response. So then the question is, what about a combination? When we compare, when we use an earlier and a later application of foliar, the later application doesn't really add to it. However, if we use a seed treatment and we combine that with any of these foliar sprays, we still see a further improvement from that foliar application. What goes well with Kelpak in a seed treatment, we've certainly have numerous trials where when you add zinc, there's synergism between the zinc and the Kelpak. In the Ukraine, they use a humate, humic acid plus Kelpak, which also works better than either the humate on its own or Kelpak on its own. And well, this is again your
Yeah, and this is around this area, and Eric, I don't want me to put you on the spot, but do you have any kind of observations that you made throughout the year? I mean, this picture is fantastic. It's not technically a control because there's two products being tested, but in terms of there's no huge difference. Starting to see a new leaf on top, but the rooting is kind of a neat deal, and that picture is really cool. And I don't know if you have any other observations on the corn crop. But this was really cool to see early on. It was a new product for at least myself and Jerry last year, and to see this picture was really neat.
Yeah, it worked really well. It did increase the roots. I'll use it on all the seeds. Every seed that I plant has to have it. I mean, it's that important.
This was seed treatment.
Yep, right on the seed. And I'd like to put it in the sprayer or through fumigation or just one pass by itself. So I'm a firm believer in it. It did work. You could see it in the combine.
Well, I don't know, the stock difference.
Yeah, it was nuts.
I don't have that picture on this, but I really need to get it in there because that was very cool too. Bigger plumbing, more ability of water nutrient flow.
Yeah, it was.
Eric claims you need a cat combine to be able to cut it.
Takes a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of trash.
This one's. Did you see this one, Riann? This one came from. So if you click it one more time, it'll go over. So the reason we got into Kelpak is Don Hohenfeld is our agronomist out in Washington, and he actually worked for a company that sold just Kelpak out in the PNW, Pacific Northwest, and they were doing a lot of trials with our carbon-based and molasses-based fertilizers, and they saw a definite synergism between using a Kelpak and using a carbon sugar source as well. And Riann can talk a lot about why that happens. They were playing around with sugars in the lab when they were testing Kelpak. But one of the biggest things is if we're pushing the plant to put more roots on, we always could use more carbohydrates to feed that. And so there's definitely a synergism there. So doing some trials here last year in Minnesota, Nebraska, South Dakota, we did them with different programs. I mean, we didn't tell guys you got to use our QLF stuff with it. But what we seen is some of the highest yield came from using Kelpak in a carbon-based product. So that was kind of neat. But the average increase on corn last year in these trials was around 6 bushel. And that was pretty cool to see from a seed treatment product that would cost you anywhere from, depending on the cost of actually treating it, anywhere from $1.50 to $4. So it's a pretty economical product with a good payback, and the reason it is because we start that plant off with a large root system early on. That plays an entire role as you go throughout the season. So, Riann, do you want to cover kind of what you were seeing early on with sugars in general and Kelpak before we started looking at?
Yeah, I mean, this was even before QLF is, we also have sugarcane industry in South Africa, and they have a product called biomass sugar, which is basically molasses. And we have some countries where we export to where they want a higher carbon content in the Kelpak. So we wanted to know whether we could actually just add some of the molasses in Kelpak. So we did a bioassay with and without sugar, and certainly we saw a bump of the rooting effect. What was interesting is when the sugarcane company realized that we want to buy molasses, the price all of a sudden increased. And then I just took simple sugar, added that to Kelpak, and again we saw a bump in the rooting effect. So there is very definite synergism between sugar containing product in Kelpak.
So if you're commanding the plant to do something, in vegetative growth, there's two sugar sinks, right? The shoots and the roots. If you're commanding a plant to do something with a hormone-like product, we kind of want some energy to feed that process as it's getting started. And I think that's kind of why we see the synergism there.
Yeah, and what is interesting here, I mean, this would have been a trial where there was no starter fertilizer. That was a starter fertilizer. Is with no fertilizer, you get about an 8%.
That's bushel,
sorry,
yeah.
8 bushel increase when you use Kelpak. But what was so interesting is with the quality liquid feed, it was 9.5%. And this is a trial that was replicated 18 times. So the best increase that we got with Kelpak was in combination with your quality liquid feed.
And that was in some pretty good yield environments too. The control was 244, and so there, I mean, to be able to pull some decent bushels on top of some pretty good yielding corn is always a nice thing to see. It doesn't drop off as you keep going up in yield. I'll kind of, Riann, were you part of this? I grabbed this from Don, but.
Well, this is already summarized.
In part of that?
Yeah, well, if you go back there, this is already
it's summarized in there. So we can skip past it, but what it was, we work with Gavilon out in Lemoore, North Dakota, and they did exactly what we were doing and just did replicated trials, and they saw the same thing from just the seed treatment alone. The control, this is on soybeans, has let's see, Kelpak said, yeah, this is soybeans. 45.6 was the control, or we did Kelpak in furrow, we picked up another 3.5 bushel. And that was pretty interesting because at a cost of $4.50 to treat it with the product, it was a good return.
So maybe I missed this earlier, guys, but you know, if we do in seed or on seed treatment, do we come back later with just Kelpak on soybeans? And at what stage?
Anywhere from V6 to R1 stage.
Oh.
Is your bean crops are very forgiving in the window that you can do the foliar application.
So that
By forgiving, I mean it's whether you apply
Herbicide.
at the 4-leaf stage or
But it will push
up to the
nutrients
R1
seed
stage,
down
you
to
have
the
very
vegetative
similar.
stage. And there's only 2 sugar sinks.
Okay.
So you can, yeah, there you go.
So the question arose that the newer trend is with your in-furrow application, people sometimes add a biological product. It's like a trichoderma or a rhizobia or even a bacillus species. Now this company, ABM, it's an American company, but they have a subsidiary in South Africa. The question was, would they be able to apply their product or products in furrow when there's already Kelpak in it? So they got some Kelpak and they did some simple lab tests. At 0.1% Kelpak, which is lower than what we would ever recommend, there was a slight stimulation of trichoderma species. At the 1%, this is more or less your concentration when you apply in furrow. There was a huge stimulation in both trichoderma and rhizobia. And the question was also, if you maybe make a mistake and you over-apply Kelpak, what would happen? And this is 2.5 times higher than the concentration that we would recommend. There was still a stimulation of both. Now, the message here is not use Kelpak with these products because you get a stimulation. Our simple claim here is you're not going to harm these organisms. And of course, naturally in soils there's already some of these species. So I believe that part of the positive effect that we see with Kelpak in furrow actually includes that you stimulate your natural beneficials that's present. At this point we're also looking at bacillus and mycorrhiza. We don't have that results yet. This was soybean applied at the V3 stage. A bit later, you go and dig up the plants. I mean, there's so many. You also have some of photos that
Yep.
look similar. It's simply if you have a bigger root system, you have a better capacity for nodulation. If you have better nodulation, you get better nitrogen assimilation.
And we're able to drought proof the crop a little bit. That's a pretty prolific difference in rooting there.
And this is your, again.
So this is from Amor's farm, and actually I'm going to let you talk again, Eric. But both of these had a base of 721.3, correct? Go ahead.
Yeah.
They both did, and so the only difference, all the variables were the same. The only difference we're looking at is Kelpak treated versus non-Kelpak treated. But
Is this a seed treatment?
This is the seed treatment. So when you guys were out pulling, did you see any differences in like nodules or?
We couldn't pull it, did we?
The stem difference is, the branching is quite different, but I mean, there's a lot of different, the combine, you're probably going to feel cutting something like that versus that, but the nodulation looks awesome on that. And so, did you guys, I know, this was in a field where you kind of split things, right? So it was tough to get an overall yield kind of look at it, but you've definitely seen something pulling plants.
Oh yeah. Yeah, lots more nodulation. I mean, obviously you get more roots, more nutrients it's gonna take in.
This is trials on soybean, South Africa, the southern hemisphere, South Africa, Argentina, Brazil. These were foliar applications, in furrow, seed treatment plus foliar. Just foliars, and then Brazil, seed treatment, foliar, and then a combination. So with all of these trials, we got results. What was interesting here, your seed treatment plus foliar gave you additional response, and also here. If we looked at early and late foliar applications, the second application, foliarly, didn't really help you much. So closer to what you have here, northern hemisphere, the Midwest, again just foliars, an in-furrow application and in-furrow plus foliar. This is the average of 8 trials, of 9 trials, of 5 trials. So there's a fair amount there. And then also some in the Ukraine. What is interesting is the seed treatment in the Ukraine. They use almost half the rate that we recommend here, but they use it in conjunction with a humate,
Sure.
a humic acid. And the trials that I've seen, there was very definite synergism between the Kelpak and the humic acid. Okay, the trial that was done last year.
Yeah, this is really wordy. Maybe you just kind of want to pick out Riann, but this was last year in Clarion, Iowa. This is where we do a lot of our professional research, and if you look at the control is actually 2 gallons boost, or of our LCBF boost as a base.
Can you tell me what a band means?
So
Is that an in-furrow application?
band would mean more of a 2x2 get it in the ground application. Okay. So every time we looked at adding, actually, gosh, this is really wordy, but so where we were the highest, and this is looking at overall yield. This was a Kelpak seed treatment. We had the boost at 2 gallons in furrow, and then we had boost with the Kelpak as a foliar at that V3 through V6, and that was kind of the highest. And where we seen was every time we kept adding. This is a lot of stuff going on, but so we look at boost in furrow and boost foliar. We pick up a few bushels here, then we talk about adding a seed treatment and take out the boost foliar and add a Kelpak seed treatment, or Kelpak foliar, we go up a little bit more, but realistically what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out a system that works well, that yields are, that picks up a statistically different, or statistically significant yield. But what we find out is if you really kind of tear this down, when you add Kelpak whether in a seed treatment or foliar, we're picking up bushels over just strictly Boost. But when we look at Kelpak and furrow with Boost, and then Boost and Kelpak together foliar, so there's synergisms in both. And so when we apply Kelpak foliar, again, we're telling that plant, create some more root systems. We're about to go into reproduction, so we're gonna need a lot of energy to keep those flowers and fill them into pods. So if we can add a carbohydrate source with that command, we seem to get a synergistic effect. So wordy, but there's a lot of good data on here if you sit down and really decipher it.
And
You
this
know what would
is
be nice to see there, Michael, and parentheses would be ROI,
Sure.
because that's,
Yeah.
you know, it's just a couple bushels, and I still don't know what all this. I can't do the math
Sure.
while I'm trying to listen.
I'll put that on there, but no, that's a
Tim actually gave me the
The
ROI
ROI.
figures, and I can't remember what it
Sure.
was.
I'll do that, Andrew.
Because
So,
some of those probably
Tell
aren't
us-
going to
tell
be
us,
positive when you're talking half a bushel or a bushel, I would imagine.
yeah,
Or they'd be pretty marginal.
it would be probably marginal, because if you look at the price of Boost is going to be around $3.25 a gallon, and then Kelpak treated is around $2 to $3. But the Kelpak foliar at a quart, is it an acre is the recommended? That's going to be closer to that $8 to $10 range. So yes, that'd be we'll put ROI on there.
Yeah, so with just the one, we're getting close to 2 bushels.
You want to go back. So if you look at just going to Boost, let's see, Boost and Kelpak seed treatment. So Boost and Kelpak seed treatment, you're looking at around a $5 to $6. 2 gallons of Boost.
13.
You're looking at around a $9, $9 to $10, and we're picking up on this replicated around for easy numbers, let's say 5.
The ROI is pretty
So there's a
impressive.
pretty good ROI here. When you get to this seed treatment, so we're at about, let's say 10 here. Let's say we're at 25. Then you're 25 to 30, and you're picking up 10. Now this is, again, obviously it's replicated in a different area, blah, 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 but there's still a good ROI on these where we're pulling it out. But yeah, I'll get you, that's a good question. We should probably include those on all these kind of graphs, because that's really what matters.
And are you doing anything different than on like dry application? Are you cutting back on anything on your dry application of fertilizer or not?
We're so new into this, we haven't. I guess I haven't heard of anyone doing that. It'd be kind of a farmer-driven approach if you were to look at that.
I was just wondering if there's any trials anywhere where they have done it on something.
Currently, QLF doesn't have any, and is Kelpak tested with?
We're not in plant nutrition,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, right. And so it's kind of tough. But I mean, Kelpak and Kelpak is pushing higher nutrient uptake, and then adding a carbohydrate and sugar-based product is helping with biological growth. So there's potentially some good data that maybe a guy should look into, but no, we don't have any data on that.
Okay, this was just, this was pot count. And here, the message is just whatever treatment you did increase the pot count. Of course, what we've seen is we not only pot count, we also look at the number of seeds per pot, and there's a definite increase in the number of seeds per pot. And if you think about it, if you have better pollen tube growth, you certainly will get that effect that one more ovule is actually being fertilized and giving a seed. And again,
Yeah, this is coming from our research agronomist looking at this exact trial we were just talking about and showing some of the differences in biomass and root growth. So this one was actually around the perm area, and again, this is Jerry could talk about this one too. But so in dark red kidneys, we weren't able to go on top of the seed treatment. So what we did was we went at that 16-ounce in furrow. And we did a Kelpak and our QLF program in furrow on these guys. And the grower standard program around here would have been a CPS-based program. So probably it was actually Riser and Radiate.
Yep.
So actually kind of similar. Radiate's a plant growth regulator or hormone, and then Riser is a 7-17-3 with micros. But one of the most interesting things, this is very early on, these guys were barely popped out of the ground yet, we were digging them up, but if you look at the root difference compared to the biomass, it was phenomenal. I mean, this kind of blew our minds because a lot of these guys still haven't quite all germinated and there's roots growing, but these guys were kind of roaring to go. And so as we were looking at this picture, we were super excited to take this to yield. And going through the season, you couldn't really see, again, a difference biomass-wise when you drove past it. We ran some drone imagery and we could see a little difference there, but when it came to yield, there was definitely a difference.
And these were 30 inches apart. It's not like we pulled some of these and brought them over to a different.
Yeah, no, these are right across the row. So we went where the line was, where the planter used this product and this product. We just took about 2 feet of plants and just right across the row.
In many different spots.
Yeah.
There's soil types going through that.
It's pretty common with kidney beans that when they emerge, it's a couple here, a couple there, the next day a couple here.
Okay.
Next door,
Yeah.
the Kelpak, it was like every one would pop out within 24 hours. Like you'd expect out of corn or something.
Right.
Okay, this is a trial on peas, foliar application, just pre-flowering. We looked at 1 pint per acre and 2 pints per acre. 2 pints performing better. Seed treatment on peas. This was an in-furrow application. No. This was a seed treatment, 3.5 fluid ounces.
With a humic acid.
The 1 pint is probably just me copying and pasting from the previous trial. So this 1 pint per acre actually, this should read 3.5 fluid ounces per 100 weight.
Sure. And so when we put our LCBF products and we pair it with Kelpak, LCBF has humectant properties. We're not an old source of carbon. We're last year's vintage. So we do have humectant properties. Has a humic acid would. It's just a different way. It's built into a highly available energy source. So kind of the same. We're getting similar effects as Kelp products are seeing with humic acid with their Kelpak. So this is peas. Early on, peas don't have a super aggressive root system, and this was probably 3 weeks after planting. So it was pretty interesting to see the root growth. And that's just a seed treatment, poor man seed treatment.
Okay, alfalfa.
We probably could skip over this. Is anyone growing alfalfa here? A little bit. Well, then let's go back to it.
Okay, trials in South Africa, we looked at different regions, different times of the year. Your 2 liters per hectare is the same than 2 pints per acre. Got yield increases, and then in California, the question was, what happens if you use Kelpak consecutively, cut after cut after cut? Now, I must say in South Africa, your first 4 cuts, people normally do not use Kelpak because your yields are pretty good. Then at your 5th cut, you start seeing a reduction in your yield, and that's normally where you apply Kelpak. So in California, we applied Kelpak 2 days after cut 5, and cut 6 gave you 11% yield increase. Then we applied 1 day after cut 6, and your cut 7 gave you a 9% yield increase. We applied 2 days after cut 7, and cut 8 gave you a 10% yield increase. Now obviously here you would be, what, 4 cuts maybe?
Three for the most part, sometimes 4.
And this kind of makes sense because what happens when you cut a plant, I mean, depending on how you're cutting a plant, the only way a plant's going to grow roots is if it's got biomass to push sugars. So that's always the problem. So if we can push root growth when there's not a whole lot of biomass, we can increase some of the yield.
Yeah, we like to say we use reverse psychology on the plant. It's the same when you have frost damage or when you have hail damage. You have less foliage, and what this plant wants to do now, it wants to recover that foliage. But there are now very little foliage to actually produce carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. So what tends to happen is the root system dies back because that carbohydrates are being translocated to the top. But what we do is we treat the plant with Kelpak, and obviously there's auxins in it. So where does the auxins come from? From the leaves and the shoot tips. So the plant thinks it's still got leaves, so it keeps producing roots. That increase in root tips produces cytokinins, which now kicks back and gives you the top growth, but you're at least maintaining and improving your root system for that natural nutrient uptake.
So if you would pair it with Boost and give it a soluble carbohydrate source, it would help. But it's just like overgrazing a pasture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this was a trial that Don Unifeld has done, is where they add Kelpak to the glyphosate. And what was interesting, at some point they, I don't know whether they ran out of Kelpak or whether the guy realized that he forgot to put Kelpak in, and then in the next tank load he added it. So from this line on and coming back this way, Kelpak was with the glyphosate, while this was not, it was only the glyphosate on its own. I believe this is kochia, which is a terrible weed to control, and it was just interesting that you got better weed control. We actually we had some trials done by Davis University, and then also in South Africa. Is people think that maybe Kelpak improves the uptake of glyphosate. That's not the case. What happens if you treat a plant with Kelpak? It really pushes the carbohydrates to the roots. So you have a bigger flow of carbohydrates to the roots, and the carbohydrate stream is just the propellant for the glyphosate. It takes the active of glyphosate where it goes. So you kill the roots, you don't get regrowth. And I think this is the message. It's not an adjuvant where the Kelpak helps with the uptake of the glyphosate. It really it takes the glyphosate where it's needed. Once you kill the roots, you're not going to get regrowth.
So when you pair that with like our Boost product, Boost helps get that glyphosate into the plant because it's got a sticker effect, and the plant will take in sugar. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch using a Kelpak foliar at that time frame. You would use a herbicide because it's two different ways of working with it. But it's an interesting picture. And
this was just this was a trial that was done in South Africa where you treat plants with a multi mineral product, and we wanted to know that if you add the Kelpak, would there be better uptake? So we actually do a sap analysis, not a leaf analysis, but the sap analysis 3 days after the treatment. So what 100% would be the level that you found with the control where there was no Kelpak. And then they add Kelpak at various concentrations. At the 0.1% solution there was no effect, but when you went to 2.2% solution of Kelpak, we certainly saw an increase, and it didn't help to get higher concentrations of Kelpak. But it tells you that if you have at least a 0.2% solution of Kelpak in that multi-mineral
shotgun micronutrient package,
then certainly there's better uptake.
So at 0.2% concentration, what would that be in equivalent to? Is that a quart of Kelpak?
A quart of Kelpak,
or less?
In how many gallons of water?
What do you guys spray? I mean, if you're doing a foliar pass with herbicide later in the season, is it anywhere from 12 to 20?
I think it's a quart in 20 gallons, something like that.
Okay. Quart and 20, so that would be kind of how to translate that over. It's around a quart of Kelpak, 0.2%. We can skip over this since this is sugar beet data. Can skip over the potatoes for right now.
Well,
Someone wants to learn something.
I'm pretty much done.
Okay. Onion. Spinach. Yeah.
Any questions?
Does that give you a better understanding of what you were seeing last year?
Yeah, like,
Definitely a lot to it, right? It's not. It's a multi-faceted approach. It's not just one active new ingredient.
I need to tell you the story. I was with the research facility when Kelp Products approached me to come work for them, and I mean, it's the first impression that I got was seaweed product in agriculture. Nah, snake oil. And in those days, the company, they didn't have an electronic database. They had some paperwork, trial reports, and they brought that over to me. And I didn't feel like really going through it. I was not too keen on it. And then because I promised them, I actually one weekend I started paging through it. And after I've gone through the third report, I know how this damn product works. And so that Monday I called the company, and I've now been with the company for 20 years. And I mean, seeing is believing. Seeing is believing. I mean, I know last year you asked a lot of questions. You were also a little bit skeptical.
Absolutely. I mean,
Should be.
yeah. Yep. And so we luckily had a few dealers like Jerry who were able to get some product out there and to see some of this stuff. And so now we're really excited to test more of it this year and then look more. And last year was pretty based on the seed treatment, right? Because it was most economical and you could get guys to maybe try it. And so we're going to do a lot more testing this year, but it's been really interesting. I talked to a consultant down in Florida who was really up on plant biostimulants, and he told me the best way to, because this is a pretty in-depth presentation. You wouldn't just go to a grower and say, check this out. You got to explain it in layman's terms if they've never heard or seen of it. So he told me, here's the best way I explain it to farmers. Every plant has a God-given recipe of plant hormones, a hormone recipe, and kelp, the species of kelp off the coast of South Africa, kelp in general, but is one of the most aggressive growing plant species on the planet. And so it's got to, like Riann had mentioned, it's got to grow pretty quickly to get up to the surface of the water to start photosynthesizing, creating carbohydrates, and it's got to have a root system that's able to withstand the tides of the ocean. So if we can take that God-given recipe in Kelpak and add it to a seed, because seeds tend to, we can supplement hormones fairly easily. You can give that to a plant that's maybe a little bit lower package of hormones. We can very positively increase plant health and plant growth. So I thought that was kind of a neat way to look at it, is we're taking the recipe of a really aggressive plant and adding it to our annuals and seeing pretty phenomenal results. So
it's an exciting product. We get asked all the time to try different products. People, manufacturers that want to get trials in your territory. When Mike asked me about Kelpak, I wasn't very excited about it because he thought it was another one of those. You weren't expecting much.
Yeah.
And then we started putting it on other stuff too, other than, like, Roberts came to us with a trial idea last year and said I'd do it if they'd try this for me. And when they sent me that picture that they went out and dug, that you see of the corn, that's when it was like, holy shit, there is something to this. So then we started going and digging in the edible beans and the wheat and the potatoes, and you could see it you could see something going on in every one of them that we tried. And then on the soybeans in a few different locations, it was pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's non-selective, right? You can add it to any type of plant.
Well, I've been criticized saying, well, you make so many claims. It's just about every single crop that you do a trial on, you see positive results. You know, now we start thinking this is a wonder product and there is no wonder product. So my answer was, can you think of a plant that's not going to do better when it's got a better root system? That is already, I mean, getting that, why does the seed treatment and the in-furrow application actually translate into yield? I believe it's just a better start that plants get real right up front. It's got better root system real early to get out that nutrients into the plant.
Another part with this, it's a natural substance too, compared to all these synthetics that you see on the market.
It's got organic accreditation, so it's just I don't know whether organic farming is on the up here.
There's some acres, but the one thing is, like you said, Jerry, is organic substance, so it has a lot of checks and balances. It really cannot pull a crop backwards. If anything, it's neutral or forward. And Riann, did you mention on when we did that bioassay with a competitive product in the marketplace, when you got too high of concentration with that competitive product, you actually see a detrimental effect on germination, correct? So with synthetics, you can, I mean, what synthetics, just like the pharmaceutical market, they want to take what seems to drive the most growth and put it in a high concentration, and you can go backwards. And so the checks and balances of a natural product is pretty nice to have. So, you know, and the hormone package of a plant is all built into the seed, and it really depends on how healthy that plant was through its life. And so the way I look at it is not every year for seed producing of corn, beans, or any crop is always perfect. And so depending on the how healthy that plant was during its life cycle will affect how aggressive or how efficient its hormone system will be. So we don't always know that when we sometimes have corn or soybeans coming from being grown in South America or different parts of the U.S. So it's always nice to add a kind of a insurance package of plant vigor and growth to something like that. It's the reason why the old timers used to run gravity tables on wheat and barley and all that stuff. They picked the biggest seed, the one that probably had the most aggressive vigor to it. So, but any other questions? That's a lot to throw at you. Like I said, I'll get you guys all the PowerPoints.
How long, from the time you harvest it to it goes to the processing plant? I mean, how long does that take?
It's been within 24 hours. It's in the can.
Really? Yeah. So how many pounds do they harvest in a day? Or tons?
On a normal day, just a single work shift, 15 tons. Our biggest bottleneck, people think, is the factory. It's not. It's the weather. Especially in winter time, Cape Town is known as the Cape of Storms.
Okay.
So you have the winter storms coming in. Wave action is too high. The boats can't go in. And then it can be up to a week where the sand in the ocean has been churned up, so visibility is not good enough for the safety of the divers. We've gone without production up to periods of 3 weeks. Then you have to catch up, and then we'll have up to 3 teams of divers going in. And we'll run 24-hour, three shifts of 8 hours.
So how many divers have you lost to sharks?
Well, the interesting thing is there's a fair amount of great white sharks in that area, but they will not enter the forest because they get entangled because of all the stems. So we haven't lost a diver yet. And that is also the reason why you have to keep parts of the forest there, because your smaller sea life actually use it for protection.
Sure.